I've been lucky enough to get into some of the best conventions in the world. I would say there's probably about 10 S-tier events in America. And if I get into all of them, that's a really good income. If I get into all of them, every single one of them, I would get into all of them, right? Spoiler alert, I did not get into all of them. And what is a boy to do but gamble his way through events I have not tried before, ones with mixed reviews? I wonder how that went. This will be a tier list, if you will. Feel free to check the timestamp and jump to a particular event that you are interested in. I'll have them on screen here. Overall this year, I did 16 events. Any of them that have individual videos that I already made, I'll just give a quick score and move on to the other oddball ones that I haven't really talked about before. And for those events that I had already made videos about, I'll make sure to include links down in the description below, as they will be much more extensive than this video. Magfest, I think one of the funnest shows in the country. Definitely one of my favorites to attend. I did a whole video on it. I'll put the link down below. I would say S tier to attend, but like B tier income. It's also a 24-hour show, which makes it kind of unique in that space, but go watch that video if you're interested in that. I think I made around 8K at this show, which is right at my average. Megacon Orlando is actually always a 10 plus K show for me, always very profitable, and also it's one of the few shows that I fully proxy. Scandalous, I know. So as you will see, or you won't see, I have no footage of this show because I wasn't there. However, I am not a big fan of the Orlando Convention Center. I find it to be kind of a headache and not very pleasant. So I would give it an A tier for finances and like a C tier for like attending experience. And that low score is pretty much solely because I do not like the Orlando Convention Center. In my experience, it is probably the most profitable Florida convention. As an ex-Florida local, I've done them all. Anime Boston, S tier. Also love the city of Boston, my favorite city in the country. However, this is my most difficult show to get into. I've only gotten into it once. It was this year. Out of the 8 times I've applied, definitely money, S tier show, S tier, love it, Gucci. That's all I have to say. Was almost a 20K-er, just a little bit off. Fanime is great. The quality of vendors there are amazing. Very well organized show. Some could say too well organized. If you've ever seen all their paperwork and application process, too well organized. Some people might say. I wouldn't say that, but some people might say that. This actually was my worst Fanime as far as numbers, but I still made like 13, 14K. It's a great show. It is very good. I don't know anybody who does not do well at this show. Anime Expo, always amazing, always a 10K plus show, S tier, very overwhelming. The crazy thing is both Fanime and Anime Boston, both anime shows beat my AX numbers, but AX is still always great. It's also local, so, you know, with those lottery changes, really hope I can get in still, but S tier for sure. GenCon, one of my favorite shows of all time, and also a record-breaking show for me this year, and normally always tied for like my top 2 or top 3 shows every year. I did a whole video on that, so you can check that out. S tier for everything. Vibes are amazing, community's amazing, great artists, always there. Definitely recommend attending if nothing else. I know it's kind of a niche gaming show, so it's not for everybody. Definitely recommend attending if nothing else. Anime NYC, this is in the same video as my DragonCon video from this year. Previously was not a big fan of this show just because it's so expensive to be in New York and the profits weren't that great. However, I will say this year was my best year. Still not like amazing, still under my average. I think I made like 6-7K or something. I can't remember. Watch that video if you want to know super bad. I think I ranked it really low in a really old video. I'll give it like a C plus, B, I'll give it like a B. Honestly, I think I kind of like Anime Frontier a little better, which is at the end of this video. It's their smaller sister show. Even though it is not as profitable as an event, spoiler, just because New York's so expensive to be in. So yeah. DragonCon, another one of my very favorite shows. S tier, amazing. Another almost 20K show this year. But yeah, amazing. Definitely recommend attending, vending, anything you can get. However, I do know not everybody at this show makes money. I know some people this year were in the red. Obviously, that was not my experience. I think DragonCon is very much my demographic, and I do really well there. So just keep that in mind that maybe the show isn't for everybody, but S tier for me, for sure. And now with the first show that I had not done before and that we will focus a little bit more extensively on for this video. DreamHack Atlanta was definitely an experiment of mine. I had heard mixed things about the show. They have multiple locations. I believe there's one in Dallas. For me, the gaming crowd and gaming shows have always been my most profitable shows. So I've been trying to fill out my roster with more of those shows, even though they're quite rare. There's not as many of them as, say, like anime shows, right? So I really wanted to give DreamHack a try, even though the reviews on it have always been sort of mixed. But damn, can I tell you, I went the worst possible year, or at least it seems that way. And there was a lot of upset vendors at this show. It's longer than you. Double you. So like 6 feet. For the price of this event and for the amount of attendance that showed up, I wouldn't be surprised if the venue itself didn't even break even. There was just so few people that attended this event, and the crazy thing is my conversion rate was actually really high. I think I just do really well at gaming venues. It's just like the demographic that enjoys my work. Almost every other person who passed my booth bought something. And I still was in the red. This was the first show I was in the red in like 8 years. Let me give you some backstory. So when I applied to the show, a bunch of my Lorcana cards had just come out. They reached out a couple days later saying that I was accepted and if I wanted a booth upgrade for free. So from a 6-foot table or 8-foot table or something to a 10x10. The catch was that they would be moving me to the trading card game area. They thought because I had illustrated card art for Lorcana that I would be a really good fit over there. And I actually thought this would be a really cool idea. They showed me the map. I thought there would be more traffic in that area than the artist alley, as the artist alley was like way in the corner of the hall. And because I had done so well at GenCon from card signings, for reference, I charge $5 for a signature on any card. And this is just mostly because if you're at the table trying to get your card signed, I can't sell my art to other customers, so you're kind of taking up space. So it's just to make sure that like I'm still making money in those instances, and that like somebody random doesn't drop like 400 cards and then go sell them on eBay or something. So I charge $5 for a card signing, and if you buy a print or something, a signing on that is free. I don't charge people to sign something that they paid for. And this went so well at GenCon, I actually made more money just from the card signings at GenCon than I made at all of DreamHack. So in my head, that was the first show that I had done card signings, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm in the trading card game area, I mean, this is going to be a great opportunity. A new set just came out. So I agreed. It was a nice 10x10 spot, and right away I noticed that there was no card sellers in the TCG area. Now I thought this was a little weird. Now there was tables set up so people could do their tabletop games, but there was only a couple other vendors and none of them were selling cards. So it's not like anybody's going to be like randomly browsing for Lorcana cards and then find my table, because there's no opportunity for that, which is kind of what I was banking on, because it's like not like I'm in the artist alley. So if you're looking for art, you're probably not going to go to the trading card game area unless you just like randomly pass by. I was already losing a little bit there on my gamble, but I decided to stick it out, and for the first day on Friday I made one sale. About 2 hours before Friday was over, I was panicking at this point, and I ended up emailing the showrunner and asking to move. And they were nice enough to come and help me move my table. They seemed apologetic about it. I was super grateful that they were willing to work with me. And so I essentially lost an entire day just off the bat. And so they found an open space for me in the artist alley, and I moved there. We pretty much finished setting up like maybe 30 minutes before the show closed, and I made like 3 more sales. So I made 4 sales on Friday, and 3 of them were in the last 30 minutes in the artist alley. And at this point, I had heard that everybody was doing really poorly in the artist alley as well. But, you know, comparing numbers, they weren't doing as bad as me, right? Like, people were making more than 1 sale for the entire day. So I was hopeful that, like, okay, you know, even if it's bad, it's not going to be, like, horrific, right? Jubal, another artist at the event, actually went around and did a survey of all the artists on how they were feeling about the event. You can imagine how bored or little work we had to do if an artist could go around and do a survey, and a rather extensive one at that.
Should you table at DreamHack Atlanta's Artist Alley? I went around and asked almost every artist at DreamHack Atlanta this year, and here's what they had to say. A whopping 78% of artists said they would not return next year at the current table price. For reference, the price was $650 wholesale, which is comparable to the price of DragonCon and AX. AX, or Anime Expo, is the largest anime convention on the continent and has roughly 10 times the expected audience of DreamHack Atlanta. I also asked artists what day they broke even, and every artist answered pretty much instantaneously. This indicates to me just how collectively worried we had been about this metric. 56% of artists said they broke even on Saturday, with a good number of them recalling the specific hour. 19% of artists broke even on Sunday, and heartbreakingly, 13% of artists had not made back costs as of 2 hours before the end of the con. Keep in mind that this was a small juried artist alley, so most of these artists are veterans with years of experience in forming and budgeting. Most felt compelled to share that it was highly unusual for them to break even as late as they did, and that sales overall had been much lower than expected. I personally made less in sales at DreamHack than at the very first con I ever sold at, and that was in Canadian dollars. For reference, a print sold for 20 Canadian dollars converts to less than $15 in USD. I also made less in sales than at the smallest con I ever sold at, which had an estimated audience of 2,000 people, in comparison to DreamHack Atlanta's supposed 40,000. Now, most artists were understanding of the fact that floods likely impacted audience turnout this year. Regardless, not a single artist at DreamHack Atlanta this year felt that $650 was a fair price. It was actually $675 if you include the wiring fee, but I digress. 0% of artists agreed with the price. 81% said $200 to $400 max was appropriate, with $300 being the most popular answer by far. Incidentally, $300 wholesale was the table cost of the con last year, and yes, the price hiked up from $300 to $650 in 1 year. The size of the artist alley also bloated to double of last year's, and the alley was placed literally at the far corner of the venue up against 2 walls. And this was despite multiple artists having advocated for a better position within the venue last year. And guess what? It got worse. All of this matters because for a lot of artists that you see at Artist Alley, this is our livelihood, and artist alleys are our workplace. And so I ask, fellow artists and friends of artists, are we going to let this stand? If one con gets away with inflating costs and ignoring artist feedback, then other cons might follow suit. If this resonates with you, please share this message with your fellow artist friends, and let's get our voices heard.
In the end, I think I made about $3,000, which isn't nothing. But it is well below my average, and I do know that it is a lot more than a lot of people there made. And that's with losing a whole day. So my issue isn't necessarily the amount of money I made, it's the costs associated with the event like this and the way things were kind of run. I also had brought an assistant, which is the main reason I was in the red. They actually left with more money than I did, mostly because I was banking on the fact that I thought I would be doing a lot of card signings and would need somebody to be running the booth while I was dealing with that. In the end, obviously was not needed. Take that information and do with it what you will. And again, the staff were great. They were very nice and kind and helpful. But that does unfortunately sum up DreamHack. I hope that they make some meaningful changes in the future. And they were communicating us through their personal Discord saying that they were going to look into costs and stuff like that. So I definitely want to give them the benefit of the doubt there. But at the end of the day, these were our experiences. Oh, and then also they refused to let vendors bring in outside food, which is a really big no-no. Like, we are not attendees. We're working the event. Like, a lot of people have dietary needs and concerns that like con hall food definitely does not meet. That should never happen. If you ever run into an event doing that, that's a big red flag. And they also use the excuse that was a venue issue, not a DreamHack issue. But I've been to MomoCon, I've been to other events in that venue, and that's not a rule. So I'm not sure what's happening there. And then also my hotel was connected to the venue, so the food I was bringing was actually purchased in the convention hall, and then they just wouldn't let me bring it past a certain point. So even with their own rule, it still like kind of didn't make any sense. I think the big thing to remember here is that the Artist Alley table fee doubled in price in the course of a year. Whether you think that price is fair or not, whether the show went well or didn't, for such a large price increase is simply this event taking advantage of the art community. I just don't know how else to get around that. And the sad part is I think it could be a really cool event. And even if I had made a boatload of money, that would not change the fact that they had taken advantage of us in this way. And for those reasons, I'm going to have to give DreamHack an F and avoid it for quite a while. I hope they turn things around. Again, I think the premise of the event is really cool. There's so many great events now that you have so much to choose from that, like, I'm not going to pick an event that treats its artists this way. Lightbox Expo, I made a separate video about this event. It's S tier, I love it. Check out that video if you want to know more about Lightbox Expo.
He's helping.
Man stuff.
Kind of. He's kind of helping. You're doing great, sweetie.
DesignerCon. It's not a show I personally had my own table at, but I had always wanted to go, so I decided to assist Sang for the weekend. It was held in Vegas this year, so it was only a 4-hour drive from where we lived, but it was a show that I had always wanted to attend. It just seemed like a really unique thing. That does look really good.
Right?
Oh my god, you're like a professional. I love like blind boxes and other things like that, so I was quite excited to go and check out the show. So I had a lot of shopping planned. And this was another one that I've heard mixed reviews on, even from people who are like more in that space and like sell vinyl toys and blind boxes, which is what DesignerCon is kind of known for. But anytime there's like a unique event and stuff, like I'm always interested in checking it out. However, this show used to be held in Anaheim, California, and reviews then were pretty mixed, saying that it was like a mid show, but like pretty cool to attend. They ended up moving to Vegas, I would assume to save on costs, as Vegas is definitely a cheaper place to hold events, especially larger ones.
The winning number is 18 red.
Yeah, dude, we're up 50 cents.
You made 50 cents?
We made 50 cents.
But as it's still in driving distance, we decided to give it a try. I have to say this show was, on the selling standpoint, absolutely awful. Sang on average makes more money than me. It's very rare for her not to do well. And we also went with a friend who sells vinyl toys, so like this is like their scene. This is like where they should shine. And they also didn't do great. And apparently far worse than they did when the show was in Anaheim. As this was our first year, so we were kind of trying to compare numbers to see if this was like a one-off oddity or if this was like the usual. The biggest problem, I think, other than like the move and attendance just not being able to sustain everybody, is the layout of the hall. All the big popular companies were all up front with their like exclusives for the show, and a crowd would gather so much that you could like barely get through the front doors of the hall, and it looked like the entire event was super packed. But as soon as you passed those like main couple large booths, the hall was completely empty, and the artist alley was in the very back. So the majority of people, I don't even think, knew that there was an artist alley, unfortunately, which is a shame because there was a ton of really cool vendors at this event and a lot of really unique and interesting types of products that people had like designed and made. So if you're thinking about boothing at this event, I'm gonna have to rank it like a D-. Maybe if it moves back to Anaheim, it'll be a lot better. That was kind of the sentiment from a lot of people. But if you just want to attend the show, I recommended it. It was cool. If you're going to try to sell at this event, I would highly recommend trying to get a booth as close to the front as possible, especially if it's still in this Vegas location. My hope for Anime Expo Chibi was like a mini AX. Feels more like a day market than anything. To be clear, I should have probably done a little bit more research, because when I looked at the con, it said it was at the Ontario Convention Center, which it's not. It's in the Ontario Convention Center parking lot. At least the artist alley is. The vendor hall is in the convention center, but everybody else gets stuck in a tent outside, which for me, I just do not do outside events typically. So right off the bat, again, maybe this was on me, I didn't see it written anywhere, but maybe it was deeper on their website. I don't know. I just wouldn't have signed up for the event. And I believe the tables were like $450, which isn't like the worst, but again, it's outside. So a $400 outside table is not great. The tent supposedly had like an air system in there, but honestly, it made the artist alley area so muggy and so like mold smelling that I was getting like this massive headache the whole time.
However, what was that smell? It had a very weird chlorine smell to it. It was pretty distinctly chlorine, and I was like, I assume what it was because they were blasting air. I don't know if a filter needed to be changed. I don't know if they changed it too quickly. I don't know if there was a cleaning solution on the filter or something. Like it was very prominent, and it wasn't like one booth selling something or anything like that. Like it was a very clear, like, this is something with the tent.
And it was just kind of an unpleasant experience. That being said, the show was pretty decent. I would not do this if you had to travel for it. It's definitely like a locals only event. And you can really see that with the attendance. Like, people don't save up money to go to this show. So like smaller items, small prints, like those were the only things that were moving. I wasn't really making big purchase sales. However, somebody did try to steal my sign. Yes, the life-size cutout sign that I have on my table. Somebody tried to steal it right off my table. So for context, I wasn't able to make it to the second day because of a family emergency. No worries, everybody's fine. But I was able to pack up all my merch the night before, but my booth setup and like the tablecloths and my sign and everything were still on the table, and there was like a QR code and a sign out saying why I wasn't there on the table. Sang was nice enough and offered to do teardown at the end of the show for me. And about 2 hours before the end of the show, Sang's table wasn't like right next to mine or anything. It was on the same aisle, like 4 or 5 booths down, but you didn't have like clear eye shot of it. But I guess we just didn't think somebody would be cheeky enough to like rip down a life-size sign off my booth display. And it was actually Sang's assistant who was helping her at the show noticed somebody carrying it and walking out the door with it and was like, hey, that's kind of weird, and asked Sang what was going on. And Sang ended up like almost tackling the guy to get it back. So just some rando tried to walk off with it. And the sign actually got damaged from this altercation. And like staff and security saw this whole thing play out and went to ask Sang after she had retrieved the goods what had happened. And at that point, the guy had booked it and like ran off and was never to be seen again. So if you're that one shitty guy, you suck. But overall, I think Anime Expo Chibi is decent enough. I would give it like a C, just because like the income isn't like crazy. I actually watched a couple vlogs about this show after the fact, and everybody ranked this show really high. And although I don't think it's a bad show or anything, I suspect that people are ranking it higher because they're scared AX is going to see and then not let them into the main Anime Expo show, which definitely is a fear that I could see people having. Or if other people's experience just is like really incredible. I'm not sure. Everybody I talked to in person said that it was pretty mid to like on the lower end of income, but still decent, like profits were still good enough to go if you're local. But then everybody I saw online seemed to say that the show was good. I think there might be people pulling their punches there just to make sure they don't upset the AX gods.
Slide off her back, because conflict is bad and we should avoid all conflict, and if there is any, then that means the relationship is bad and you don't deserve love.
Now, I've been seeing a lot of pink aesthetic booths popping up around different shows. It's been the talk of the town. Are these the new meta? Is cutesy in? For SJ Made, I'll actually be sharing a table with one of these pink meta booths. I had to do some alterations to blend in. Why not give this a true test? SJ Made is a little weird because it starts on Black Friday. However, setup is the day before Thanksgiving. So we drove up to San Jose to do setup, and then as any proper red-blooded American, we had Thanksgiving dinner at Denny's. So that's a little awkward, but I would say this is a pretty decent show. I wouldn't suggest flying out to it, but if you're close enough to drive in, then definitely give it a consideration. SJ Made Holiday Fair is more of a craft show than anything else. There's a lot of ceramic and pottery type booths. It has definitely a different vibe than, say, an anime convention, even though you definitely have your typical anime booths still present. So I was a little worried that I would be out of place. I still did pretty well. I think I made about $4,500, something around there, which is about half my average for most like conventions. However, it is only a 2-day event. Overall, I do think this is a good show, even though from what I heard from everybody, sales were substantially down, about 50% from most people I talked to, which is kind of a big theme of 2024, especially with smaller types of events. But I still thought it was quite decent. And this is me being fully aware that my work was kind of niche for the crowd that came and was buying things. It definitely is much more, home goods, craft stuff, fancy soaps, all sorts of stuff like that. Got that craft show vibe, but it definitely feels more high-end. From my experience this year, a solid B. Also, I don't think I tricked anybody into buying stuff who wasn't gonna buy stuff from my table anyways. Literally nobody bought from Sang's side of the table that bought from mine, and vice versa. It was kind of funny, like our audiences are so different that like trying to fuse our tables together to see if we could get like crisscrossing audiences was super not very effective. So pink booth only work if you naturally pink, I guess. I don't know. Anime Frontier is Anime NYC's like smaller sister show that is in Dallas Fort Worth. I have to say right off the bat, I think this is a really well organized show. You have bigger companies, you have a good assortment of artists, and there's a lot to do. I think this is a really fun show to attend. However, it actually feels like a smaller Anime NYC, unlike Anime Expo Chibi comparative to AX. Money, it wasn't great. I'd class it as like a C+ show. If you're local, definitely check it out. I mean, but if you have to travel to it, I would be more careful. Especially, it's definitely a fan art show. It definitely has the same kind of vibes as Anime NYC, and the buying patterns were pretty similar there. And Anime NYC already isn't like one of my better shows, so cut those numbers in half, and then you have Anime Frontier. You know, still not awful. I think the bigger issue with the show is just its dates. It's at the beginning of December, and historically, winter shows just don't perform well, other than like Hallmat and other shows that are known for being winter shows, which has always confused me a little bit. I would always think that like people were going to do like their holiday shopping, but because it's so close to Black Friday also, I think a lot of people have already done their holiday shopping and then aren't necessarily in the zone of doing their last minute holiday shopping. So it falls kind of in a weird spot. And the Artist Alley isn't the smallest for the size of the show it is, and for not the biggest attendance rate. So, you know, there's definitely going to be competition at the show. So definitely keep that in mind. Again, very fan art heavy seems to be what people are bringing and looking for. So I give it a C+ to Vendat, and I give it a looks super fun as an attendee, would recommend. I also had kind of a cruddy spot against the back wall, but I don't know how much that actually affected anything. I think I made like 3.5K, pretty underwhelming, but again, if you're local, why not give it a shot? And those are all the events that I did in 2024. This coming year, I'm going to be a lot more picky about the shows that I do, and I'm going to try to do a lot fewer of them, as about 30% of the conventions I did contributed to about 80% of my convention overall profit.
Everything feels lighter staring at the ceiling fan, so I look up at the ceiling fan. Everything feels lighter staring at the ceiling fan.
Oh, and also, if you want to like and subscribe or whatever, you know, that'd be cool. That'd be sick. That'd be nice. I'd appreciate that or whatever, you know. You could do that if you want or whatever.